What's up guys, today I'm back with another super useful advice video for y'all. As seen in the title, today we're going to explore some of the small grammatical details you should look for when you learn a language. I'm not talking about noun cases, verb conjugations, the existence of articles, or anything like that. This video is about very nitpicky points of grammar that many people probably wouldn't even know to look for. But knowing these grammatical concepts can be the difference between a moderately skilled L2 speaker and a highly proficient one. And this will touch on a lot of points that people often take for granted thinking that they're universal, whereas they simply aren't. I should mention though that this video will not include vocabulary words that are often distinct in other languages like no. That topic will get a video of its own sometime in the future. However, for language learning purposes, I treat closed classes like articles, pronouns, and conjunctions as grammar, so those will be included in this video. Let's go! To start, we're going to look at the conjunction that. This is the most basic recursive conjunction used to connect clauses that have some relation to each other. It's actually fortunate that this video is in English because we only have one word for that, because otherwise every time I reference the conjunction I'd have to say multiple words with slashes. That's right, often in other languages there are different words for that depending on the role, and you will be wrong if you use the wrong word for that. Before we get into the differences though, two terms I need to define. The main clause is, at least in English and most other SVO languages, the clause that goes before that, and the subordinate clause goes after that. As for the differences to look for, one of the basic ones is whether that is connecting an entire main clause to its subordinate clause or just connecting the main clause's object to the subordinate clause. Swedish is an example of this kind of language, so as an example sentence, Jag vet att vi såg filmen tillsammans. This means I know that we saw the movie together, and in this sentence, the word that is connecting the entire main clause to its subordinate, and the Swedish word is att. However, take this other sentence, Jag gillade filmen som vi såg igår, which means I like the movie that we saw yesterday. In this sentence, that connects just the movie to the subordinate clause, so here the Swedish conjunction is som. Som is also the word for the preposition like, by the way. However, the conjunction som can establish the object of the main clause as either the subject or object of the subordinate clause. Guess what? That's a further distinction that some languages make. We'll use French for this. For the entire clause conjunction, French always uses que. But for the only object conjunction, the French word for that depends on whether the object of the main clause is the subject or the object in the subordinate clause. I'll just import the sentences I used to explain this in the French language overview. In the sentence, voici le cadeau qu'elle m'a donné, meaning, here's the gift that she gave me, the gift is the object of the subordinate clause, so the word for that is que. However, in the sentence, il est le chien qui est apparu sur la scène, meaning, he's the dog that appeared on stage, the dog is the subject of the subordinate clause, so the word is qui. But that's not the end of the distinctions that some languages make between words for that, as in some, the only object conjunction can change to match the grammatical gender or noun class of the noun that it's describing. Dutch is one of these languages, and relevant to context, that has a common neuter gender system explained on the screen. The Dutch word for that as an entire clause conjunction is dat, and in the sentence, ze vergaf het tot voor autosprong, meaning, she forgave the deer that jumped in front of her car, we can see that dat is also the conjunction used in the object-only situation, if it's modifying a singular neuter noun. If the noun is in the common gender, then the word is die, as in, ze vergaf de koe die voor autosprong, meaning, she forgave the cow that jumped in front of her car. Die is also used for any plural nouns regardless of gender, like in, ze vergaf de dieren die voor autosprongen, meaning she forgave the animals that jumped in front of her car. Deer is neuter, by the way. Here's a chart showing all the languages I've learned and what category they fall into. The boss level of this concept is Russian and Polish, Slavic languages, which both make all of the distinctions possible. They use что and że respectively for the entire clause conjunction, while for the object-only conjunction they use которые and które respectively, and then they inflect it for whatever gender, case, and number forms are necessary, and there may also be a preposition in front of it. That last point leads us perfectly into the next section. When a language has to connect clauses using a preposition, how does it go about doing that? That's something you'll have to find out when you learn a language. As far as I'm aware, there are three strategies that languages use to do this, those being pied piping, preposition stranding, and pronominal resumption. Pied piping is a rather weird term that I literally just learned writing the script for this video, so for the backstory, I'll just quote its Wikipedia article. The term was introduced by John Robert Ross in 1967. It references the legend of the Pied Piper of Hamelin, where a piper lured rats and children away from their town. Okay then, I now have a lot of questions. Here's everything else I found out in this rabbit hole. Linguistically though, pied piping is the strategy in which the linking preposition goes before the entire subordinate clause and the linking conjunction, in English which, goes after it. This is what's used in English in more formal settings or if you're posh. I've complained about this before. It's also the strategy used in most European languages, namely the Romance languages, the Slavic languages, and Hungarian as far as I'm aware. I'll use one example sentence, this whole section which is informal English. This is the bowl in which I eat ice cream. In Polish, that's to jest miejsce, w które jadam lody. Also notice the inflections on the conjunction które, and in French that sense is c'est beau donc que je mange de la glace. You might have noticed that that's not how we normally say it in English. Astute observation. The second strategy a language could use to connect the preposition between clauses is preposition stranding. This is when the preposition goes after the verb in the subordinate clause away from the noun that it modifies, hence the stranding. We have this in casual English, of course, being, this is the bowl that I eat ice cream in. This is also the norm in the other Germanic languages, like in Swedish, den är skolan som jag äter glass i. Outside of the Germanic languages, though, this strategy is rare. The final prepositional relativization strategy I know of is pronominal resumption. This strategy starts out looking like preposition stranding, but following the preposition, the noun from the main clause is reinforced by a pronoun. In English, this would look like, this is the bowl that I ate ice cream in it. This sentence is ungrammatical in English, but in the Semitic languages, this is the only way you could say it, like in Hebrew, or Important to understand, in Hebrew the preposition and pronoun are both encoded in the same word, and the pronoun actually means her because the word for bowl in Hebrew is feminine. Relativization will definitely come up, so you need to know which strategy your target language uses. By the way, notice how I was saying prepositions a lot in that last section? Well, that's not necessarily a given. The name preposition specifically refers to when it goes before its noun. If it goes after, then it's called a postposition. Hungarian is an example of a language that uses postpositions like in the phrase "atangaralat," under the sea. The collective term for both, by the way, is adpositions. Another difference that could happen and is important to be aware of is the word like, as it means similar to. This word could be either a preposition when describing a noun or a conjunction when describing a verb phrase, and a fair amount of languages differentiate between them. Sometimes the difference is just an extra segment, both of which are shown in the Hungarian sentence, meaning I'm like a wolf and I run like my tail is on fire. In this case, minta for the verb phrase is just mint with the word if, ha, added after it, so it reads as like if. By the way, notice how I just said that Hungarian has postpositions then showed a preposition? This is another thing worth knowing. Like often breaks rules since it's more of a compare than an adposition. On the contrary, other languages have the two words looking nothing alike, such as Hebrew, where the above sentence would be Now about the other like, you know how the Spanish verb gustar is commonly said to mean like, but it actually means please because the subject and object are switched? This isn't just a Spanish thing. Semantically speaking, verbs having to do with emotions tend to assign unclear roles of doer and affectee to their noun. Take like, for example. Do you like the thing, or is the thing pleasing you? Different languages answer this question differently. Same concept applies to verbs like lack. Do you not have the thing, or is the thing missing from you? These are different from visual verbs like kick, because it's pretty obvious that the kicker is the agent and the ball or whatever is the patient. But like, be aware when learning emotion verbs that the thematic relations may be reversed according to your target language's liking. Continuing on with the theme of comparisons, you know phrases like as good as, more than, less than, stuff like that? You'll need to find out how your target language navigates that as well. For the more than, less than part, the word then could take different forms, although it's often from. Spanish does something interesting here though. If you're making a comparison with something that's not numbered, you use que, but if the comparison is with a number, you use de. For example, viajo más que tú means I travel more than you, but el vuelo dura más de 10 horas means the flight lasts more than 10 hours. For as good as, languages often just say good like or so good like so. Here's just a list of those. Now for a completely new thing you may have never thought of before in your life. Does the presence of a number modifying the noun change the form of the noun? In a lot of languages, it just straight up doesn't. This is the case in English, as we could look at stars, or we could look at 2 stars, 3 stars, 10 stars, etc. The number being there doesn't change the plurality of the noun. However, in some languages, the presence of a number changes whether you pluralize the noun or not. The change is often just that the noun doesn't get pluralized, like in Hungarian, where like in the above example, you could have csillagok, but also két csillag, három csillag, 10 csillag, etc. But Hungarian makes it easy by never pluralizing nouns with any number present. In Arabic, the noun is pluralized as normal when the number is between 3 and 19, Arabic has a dual number, but if the number is 20 or above, the noun stops being pluralized. So in Arabic, we can have just nujum, but also tlat nujum and 10 nujum, but then go bigger and we get 20 نجمة, 37 نجمة, and 100 نجمة. The cycle repeats every 100 though. Also after 19 in Arabic, the numbers themselves stop agreeing with the noun for gender. Then we get to the absolutely wild systems of Slavic languages with their noun cases involved in all their glorious confusion. Polish is the less complicated of the two I know just in this regard, and its system requires that if the number is 2, 3, or 4, the noun pluralizes normal, but if the number is 5 through 10, the noun goes to the plural in the genitive case. Therefore, in Polish, we have just koty, but also dwa koty and 4 koty, but then 5 kotów and 8 kotów. And the cycle goes in tens, except for 11 through 20, which all do the genitive thing. Russian is similar, but there's an added layer of complexity. For the numbers 2 through 4, the nouns pluralize by going to the genitive singular. In Russian, there's just koty, but then there's also dwa kota and 4 kota, but then 5 kotów and 8 kotów. For both Polish and Russian though, those rules only apply when the noun is in either the nominative or accusative case. If it's in any other, then the numbers get their own special forms and the noun stays in the case it was in. Finally, and also having to do with numbers, is telling time. Telling time is fairly unique to most languages in practically every aspect. This starts with the difference between languages and societies in general that use 12-hour versus 24-hour time. And then it can get a bit crazy when regarding the hours and minutes. Of course, languages all have their own words for stuff like half, quarter, and such, but as far as systems go, they're also pretty interesting. For one, in addition to halves and quarters, some languages split their hours into thirds as well, which is 20 minutes. So in Arabic, as-sa'a tis'a illa thult means it's a third till 9 or 8:40. Another important difference to note is that we in English count up from the hours, so when we say it's 3:07, we mean that it's 7 minutes after 3 o'clock. However, Russian hours are counted according to which hour one is currently in, which means that when it's not an exact hour, the hour you say is the next one. Think about it according to a 24-hour time system. It starts at midnight with 0 o'clock, and then that hour is the first hour ending with 1 o'clock. This continues throughout the day. So to say 3:07 in Russian, you'd say 7 минут четвёртого, which literally means 7 minutes of the 4th hour. Hour is implied. Also in Russian, the hour is in a different case and derivational form when you're counting from the top rather than the bottom of the hour. Just read on screen if you're interested. Obviously, time in Russian is a headache. But the language I've learned with the most complicated time-telling system has got to be Catalan. Like Russian, Catalan also states times based on the next hour, but what's super unique about Catalan time-telling is that they count minutes off of the quarter hours. As an example, 6:34 would be pasan 4 minutos de 2:47, or 4 minutes past 2 quarters of 7, the 7th hour, and 10:10 would be faltan 5 minutos para un quart d'onze, or 5 minutes lag from a quarter of 11, the 11th hour. Oh yeah, also they say 2 quarters instead of half an hour. The moral here is that you should definitely set aside some time in your target language to learn your way around the clock. Also, beware of Catalan chronology. To close out the video, I'll give a quick rundown of everything covered in the video. First, the conjunction that can change in certain languages based on if it's connecting whole clauses or just an object, and also based on the case and gender of said object. Also, there are 3 main ways at least that languages can choose from to connect adpositions across clauses, and you'll need to figure out which one applies to your target language. Then, the closed class forms of like can change depending on if they're with a noun phrase or a verb phrase. In addition, verbs of emotion often have differing semantic relations to their nouns due to their abstract nature. Comparisons can also use various word combinations. Finally, numbers can change if or how a noun is pluralized just by being there, and it's high-key worth it to learn how to tell time, which is one of the most common things that people talk about. This is by no means an exhaustive list though, so do you have any other sneaky grammatical concepts? Leave them in the comments for everyone to benefit from. Also consider liking and subscribing. Thanks for watching!